An early spring morning in the village of Oak Creek smelled of melting snow and damp earth. A thin mist lay over the field, and the first rays of sun timidly broke through the gray clouds, touching the peeling paint on the porch of the old school. Lisa, a sixth grader with messy braids, walked toward the school, tugging on her backpack strap. Her boots squelched through puddles, and her mind was on the math test she hadn't studied for. But everything changed when she noticed a box on the porch. An old cardboard one taped up. It was slightly off to the side, as if someone wanted it to be found. But not right away. From inside came a faint squeak, thin and trembling, almost muffled by the wind. Lisa froze, her heart pounding. She dropped her backpack to the ground and knelt, her fingers still cold from the morning air. Tore at the tape, ripping the cardboard. Inside, on an old rag, 5 tiny puppies were huddled together. Their eyes were barely open, their fur matted with dampness, and their paws trembled as if begging for warmth. One white puppy with a closed eye was squeaking loudest of all, as if calling for help. "Oh, you must be freezing," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. She looked around as if searching for who could have left the box. But no one was there. Only the wind chasing dry leaves across the schoolyard. A few minutes later, the yard buzzed with noise. Lisa's classmates, hearing her cry, ran to the porch. Mary, her best friend, brought her scarf and wrapped the puppies up. Peter, always boisterous, offered them a piece of his sandwich, which immediately fell apart in their tiny paws. The children chattered, laughed, and argued over which puppy would be theirs. Their voices rang like bells, filling the cold morning with warmth. Just then, the school door creaked open, and their teacher, Miss Davis, came out onto the porch. Her face, usually stern, softened when she saw the box. She adjusted her glasses, sighed, and there was something heavy in her sigh, as if she already knew what would happen next. "Lisa, who found this?" she asked, walking closer. "I did," Lisa answered quietly, not taking her eyes off the puppies. The white one squeaked again, and her fingers involuntarily touched its tiny head. Ms. Davis looked at the children, at the box, then back at the children. Her lips tightened into a thin line. "The shelter won't take them," she said at last, her voice flat but with a hint of weariness. "No room. I'll call Mr. Smith now. He'll handle it." "Handle it," Lisa repeated, a flash of fear in her eyes. She didn't understand what that meant, but something in the teacher's tone made her heart clench. "Don't worry." Ms. Davis placed a hand on her shoulder but looked away. "Go to class. Lessons are starting soon." The children, still whispering, shuffled toward the school, but Lisa lingered. She looked at the box, at the puppies huddled together, and felt a lump grow in her throat. The white puppy, the one with the closed eye, suddenly licked her finger, and she barely held back tears. "I'll be back," she whispered, though she knew the puppies wouldn't understand. But it was a promise she was making to herself. As Lisa walked into class, she heard Ms. Davis on the phone. "Mr. Smith, please come to the porch, there's a box." "Yes, again." Lisa clenched her fists. She didn't know who Mr. Smith was, but something told her not to expect anything good. Mr. Smith walked toward the school porch. His heavy boots thumped dully on the gravel. The morning wind ruffled the collar of his old jacket, and something heavy churned in his chest like a premonition. He knew why Miss Davis was calling him. It wasn't the first time. The box on the porch, the squeaking inside. It was a recurring bitter ritual he hated but didn't dare to break. In Oak Creek, you didn't argue with what had always been done. When he arrived, the box was still there by the peeling steps. 5 puppies were huddled inside. Their faint squeaks cut through the air like a thin knife. Mr. Smith squatted, placing his calloused hands on his knees. His face, weathered and tired, showed no emotion, but his dark, deep eyes lingered on the white puppy with the closed eye. It was squeaking louder than all the others, as if pleading, "Look at me." Mr. Smith turned away. He didn't want to look for too long. "Here we go again." he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The groundskeeper, old George, a stooped man with a perpetually disgruntled look, walked by. He stopped, glanced at the box, and lowered his voice so the children still gathered at the school entrance wouldn't hear. "Don't stall, Mr. Smith, you know where they go." Mr. Smith nodded, but there was no conviction in his nod. He felt his throat tighten, as if an invisible noose was closing in. George shuffled away, but Mr. Smith remained, looking at the puppies. The white one squeaked again, and for a moment, Mr. Smith thought it was looking directly at him, as if it knew what was about to happen. Ms. Davis came out of the school, adjusting the scarf on her shoulders. Her gaze was strict, but a shadow of sympathy flickered in her eyes when she looked at the box. "Mr. Smith, do what needs to be done," she said softly. "And quickly, before the children come back." He nodded silently, but his fingers, clutching the edge of the box, trembled. Ms. Davis turned to the children, who were still whispering by the door. "All right, everyone inside. Lessons starting. Mr. Smith will take care of it." Lisa, who was closest, looked at Mr. Smith. Her eyes were big and anxious, as if asking, "What will you do?" Mr. Smith looked away. He couldn't answer. Not to her, not to himself. He lifted the box, pressing it to his chest, and walked away from the school. The puppy's squeaks grew fainter, muffled by the crunch of his boots on the gravel. In class, Lisa sat staring at her desk. Her fingers picked at the edge of her notebook, and the white puppy was still in her mind, its tiny tongue licking her finger. She wasn't listening to the teacher. She didn't hear Mary whisper something about the test. Her thoughts were with the box, carried away by that silent man. Who was he? Why did everyone look at him as if he were about to do something terrible? "Lisa, are you listening?" Miss Davis's voice broke her from her thoughts. "Yes," Lisa lied, lowering her head. But her heart was pounding, and she knew she couldn't sit still. She glanced stealthily out the window, but Mr. Smith was gone. Only the empty yard and puddles reflecting the gray sky remained. Mr. Smith walked toward the river that flowed behind the village. The box in his hands felt heavier than it actually was. He knew that by the water no one would see. That's how it had always been. That's what his father had done when Mr. Smith was a boy. That's what everyone in Oak Creek did when they found puppies no one wanted. But each step was like a hammer blow to his chest. He remembered his own daughter, Kathy, now in her 30s. As a little girl, she would bring puppies home, hide them in the barn and whisper, "Dad, they're alive." He would laugh then but help her hide them until her grandmother found them and chased everyone away. "Dad, they're alive." Her voice echoed in Mr. Smith's head. He stopped, looked at the box. The white puppy squeaked again, and Mr. Smith felt something inside him crack. He gritted his teeth and continued toward the river. The river flowed slowly. Its muddy waters lazily flowed around mossy stones. Mr. Smith stood on the bank, clutching the box so tightly the cardboard began to give under his fingers. The puppy's squeaks, muffled by the wind, cut through the sound of the water, and each sound was an accusation in his chest. The white puppy, the one with the closed eye, squeaked loudest of all, as if it knew its fate was being decided. Mr. Smith looked at the river but didn't see the water. He saw his daughter Kathy's face, a little girl with messy braids like Lisa's, pleading, "Dad, don't give them away." He shook his head, trying to chase away the memories, but they clung to him like wet leaves on his boots. In Oak Creek, things were simple. Puppies no one took in were drowned. His father, grandfather, and neighbors had all done it. It wasn't discussed, it was just done. Mr. Smith knew that if he came back with the box, George would look at him with contempt and Ms. Davis would sigh in relief but remain silent. He knew no one would ask where the puppies were because they all knew. But today something was different. Maybe it was the look in Lisa's eyes, watching him from the porch as if begging, "Don't do it." Maybe it was the squeak of the white puppy, which wouldn't stop, as if calling him by name. Mr. Smith knelt at the water's edge. The cold seeped through his jacket, but he didn't notice. He placed the box on the ground and opened it. The 5 puppies trembled, huddling together. The white one lifted its head. Its tiny nose twitched, and its one open eye looked right at Mr. Smith. There was no fear in that gaze, only trust. Such pure trust that Mr. Smith felt his throat tighten. He remembered how Kathy, as a little girl, had hidden puppies in the barn. How she had cried when her grandmother found them. "They're alive, Dad." The words echoed in his head, and he suddenly realized he couldn't do it. Not today, not to these puppies. He closed the box but didn't tape it. His hands were trembling as he stood up. The river continued to flow, indifferent like the village itself, which was waiting for him to do what was expected. Mr. Smith gritted his teeth. He knew if he came back with the box, he would be questioned, noticed, and people would talk behind his back. But in that moment, for the first time, he felt that it didn't matter. He turned his back on the river, holding the box to his chest, and walked back to the village. Each step was heavy, but something new was stirring in his chest. Not relief but resolve. Fragile like the first leaf of spring. At school, lessons continued as usual. Liza sat at her desk, but her thoughts were far away. She was drawing the white puppy in her notebook, its closed eye, its tiny nose. Her pencil trembled, and she didn't notice Mary nudging her with her elbow. "Liza, what's wrong?" her friend whispered. "Miss Davis is looking." Liza didn't answer. She couldn't explain why her heart ached so much. She had seen Mr. Smith leave with the box and knew the adults were hiding something. She had heard her classmates whispering, someone saying, "They'll drown them like always." The word drown cut her like a knife. She remembered her grandmother telling her about the old days, when there were no shelters in the village and puppies were disposed of. Liza hadn't understood then, but now, looking at the empty porch outside the window, she felt fear squeezing her chest. When the bell rang to end class, Liza ran into the yard. She hoped to see the box. She hoped Mr. Smith had just left it somewhere. But the porch was empty. She stood, looking at the puddles, and felt tears stinging her eyes. "I promised I'd come back," she thought, and her fists clenched. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she couldn't just forget. Meanwhile, Mr. Smith had reached the old boiler room behind the school. The building, abandoned since the 1980s, stood off to the side, hidden by thick nettles. He pushed the rusty cellar door, and it creaked, releasing the smell of dampness and coal. It was dark inside, but Mr. Smith knew this place like the back of his hand. He had often repaired the old furnace here when the boiler room was still working. Now it was his sanctuary, a place where no one asked questions. He placed the box on the floor next to a pile of old sacks and sighed deeply. The puppy's squeaks echoed in the empty cellar, and Mr. Smith felt his heart beat faster. He had made a choice, but what now? The sun was setting, painting the sky over Oak Creek in soft orange tones. Liza trudged home along the path that wound through the field, gripping her backpack strap so tightly her knuckles turned white. All day her thoughts had been on the puppies. She couldn't forget their squeaks. She couldn't get the image of the empty porch out of her head, where she had run after every class, hoping the box would miraculously reappear. But there was no miracle. Only the words of her classmates. They drowned them. "Liza, forget it," echoed in her ears, and each time her heart clenched as if struck. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. The white puppy with the closed eye appeared in her dreams, and she would wake up with wet cheeks. Passing by the old boiler room, Liza slowed her pace. The rusty building, overgrown with nettles, had always scared her. But today something was different. A faint light, thin as a thread, was coming from under the cellar door. Liza froze. Her heart pounded. She knew no one went in there. The boiler room hadn't worked in years. But there was light, and a quiet sound that sounded like a familiar squeak. She stepped closer. The nettles stung her legs, but Liza didn't notice. The cellar door was ajar, and holding her breath, she peeked inside. There, in the dim light of an old lamp on a pile of sacks, lay the box, the same one. And next to it, on a rusty stool, sat Mr. Smith. His large hand, covered in old scars, was gently holding the white puppy. It was sleeping, curled up in his palm, while the others huddled in the box, squeaking and nudging each other. Liza gasped, and Mr. Smith's head snapped up. His eyes, usually tired and empty, widened for a moment in surprise. "What are you doing here?" His voice was raspy but not angry. Liza didn't answer. She looked at the puppies, at the white one in his hand, and the tears she had held back all day streamed down her cheeks. "They're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't." Mr. Smith put a finger to his lips, looking around as if afraid they would be heard. "They'll live here for now, but not a word to anyone. Understand?" Liza nodded, wiping her tears with her sleeve. She stepped closer, and Mr. Smith didn't stop her. She knelt beside the box, and the white puppy, sensing her, opened its one eye. It squeaked, licked her fingers, and Liza smiled through her tears. "Why didn't you?" She hesitated, unable to say the word. "Drown them." Mr. Smith looked away. His fingers involuntarily stroked the white puppy's fur, and he was silent for a long time before answering. "I couldn't," he finally said, and there was something in his voice Liza hadn't expected. Not anger, not indifference, but pain. "They're alive." Liza looked at him, and warmth grew in her chest. She didn't know this man, but in that moment he seemed to her not just a groundskeeper, but someone who understood. Someone who, like her, didn't want to accept injustice. "I won't tell anyone," she promised quietly. "Can I visit them?" Mr. Smith frowned, but then nodded. "Only be careful. If George finds out, it'll be bad." Liza nodded again, and her gaze fell on the box. The puppies were scrambling, squeaking, and there was so much life in that sound that she felt the fear that had squeezed her all day begin to recede. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew these puppies were her responsibility. And Mr. Smith's. Meanwhile at school, Miss Davis was packing her things. She had stayed late to grade papers, but her mind was uneasy. She had seen Liza run to the porch, seen her eyes full of anxiety, and she knew Mr. Smith had gone to the river with the box. It had always been this way. But something in his silence, in his look when he took the box, had unsettled her. She sighed, adjusted her scarf, and walked out into the yard. The empty porch looked at her like a silent reproach. She didn't want to think about what Mr. Smith had done, but she knew she wouldn't dare to ask. Mr. Smith, meanwhile, sat in the cellar, looking at the puppies. He had brought them some milk from the school cafeteria and an old bowl no one would miss. The white puppy slept in his hand, and Mr. Smith felt its warmth, so fragile, so alive. He knew he couldn't keep them here for long. George or someone else would notice eventually. But this evening, under the dim light of the lamp, he felt for the first time in many years that he had done the right thing. And that thought, though it was frightening, warmed him like a faint sunbeam. A week passed, and Oak Creek came to life with the spring warmth. Grass pushed through the melted earth, and the air smelled of blooming lilacs. Liza went to the boiler room every morning and evening, hiding pieces of bread and a plastic bottle of milk under her jacket. Her heart beat faster when she pushed the rusty cellar door, and each time she saw the box with the puppies, she exhaled with relief. They were alive and they were growing. The white puppy, whom she secretly named Ray, was already crawling confidently, nuzzling her hands. His closed eye never opened, but his one eye shone like a little star, and Liza felt that he recognized her. Mr. Smith also came to the cellar, bringing old rags to keep the puppies warm and a bowl of food he had taken from home. He was quiet, but his gaze softened when Ray climbed onto his lap. Liza noticed how he carefully petted the puppy, and in those moments he didn't seem like just a groundskeeper. He was a man who, like her, couldn't betray those who trusted him. One morning Lisa brought Mary and Peter. They stood at the cellar entrance, shifting from foot to foot, clutching bags of food they had begged from their parents. Mr. Smith frowned when he saw them, but Lisa stepped forward. "They won't tell," she said quietly. "They want to help too." Mr. Smith looked at the children for a long time, then nodded. The children knelt, and the cellar filled with their whispers and laughter as the puppies licked their fingers. Lisa saw Mr. Smith watching them, and something she couldn't understand flickered in his eyes, a mixture of weariness and relief. A few days later, Mr. Smith hung a handwritten sign by the school. "Do not discard. If you find puppies, bring them here." He didn't say anything about it to anyone, but Lisa noticed Ms. Davis stop as she passed and read the sign. Her face wavered, but she said nothing, only adjusted her scarf and went into class. A month passed. Word of the puppies spread through Oak Creek. People came to the boiler room, some out of curiosity, others with disbelief. But 3 of the puppies had already found homes. Mary's mother took a black one with a white spot, naming him Fluff. Peter's neighbor, an old man with kind eyes, took the second, a reddish one, and named him Baron. The third, a gray one, went to a family from a neighboring village. Each time Lisa heard that a puppy had found a home, she felt warmth in her chest, but then she looked at Ray. She couldn't imagine giving him to anyone else. One evening, when Lisa was sitting in the cellar, Mr. Smith came in with empty hands. He looked tired, but there was something new in his gaze, a serenity she hadn't seen before. "Lisa," he said, sitting down next to her, "do you want to take the white one?" Lisa froze. Her heart pounded, and she looked at Ray, who was sleeping curled up in the box. "Can I?" Her voice trembled. "What about your grandmother?" "I'll talk to her," Mr. Smith interrupted. "She won't say no." Lisa nodded, and tears streamed down her cheeks again. But this time they were tears of joy. She picked up Ray and he licked her chin. Mr. Smith looked at them, and a faint smile touched his lips. The first one Lisa had ever seen from him. A few days later, Lisa brought Ray home. Her grandmother, seeing the puppy, frowned. But when Mr. Smith came in and quietly explained that it was a special case, she just sighed and waved her hand. Ray slept in an old basket by Lisa's bed and greeted her every morning by nuzzling her hands. Mr. Smith never spoke of that day by the river again. No one in the village knew that he hadn't done what was expected of him. But Lisa knew. And every time she saw him in the schoolyard, fixing a bench or sweeping the porch, she would catch his eye. There were no words in it, but there was an understanding. He had made a choice not to do what was always done, but to do what was right. And that choice had changed everything. Oak Creek continued its life, but something in it had become different. The sign by the school remained, and sometimes new puppies appeared in the box on the porch. But now they weren't taken to the river. They were brought to Mr. Smith, and Lisa, Mary, and Peter helped find them homes. And each time, looking at Ray, Lisa knew that the hope she had felt that day was not in vain. Love and truth had won. Summer came to Oak Creek quietly, as if afraid to scare away the fragile warmth that had settled in the village after that spring. Wildflowers swayed in the gentle wind, and the schoolyard, usually empty in June, came to life with the voices of children who still came to the boiler room. The sign "Do Not Discard," faded by the sun but still readable, had become a kind of unspoken symbol. People no longer looked away when they saw a box on the porch. They knew Mr. Smith and Lisa would find someone to take them. And although no one spoke of it aloud, something had changed in the village. It was as if a crack in an old cold tradition had given root to something new. Lisa sat on her front porch, petting Ray, who had grown now and was trying to chase butterflies, comically stumbling on his short paws. His closed eye never opened, but his one eye shone like a sunbeam, and Lisa, every time she looked at him, she remembered that day at the boiler room when Mr. Smith had said, "They're alive." Those words had become something more than just an explanation for her. They were a promise that even in a world where everything seemed predetermined, you could choose a different path. One evening, as the sun was setting over the field, Liza noticed Mr. Smith walking along the path toward her house. He was carrying something in his hands, an old tin box, scuffed but clean. Ray, seeing him, wagged his tail and ran to meet him. Liza jumped up, feeling her heart pound. Mr. Smith rarely came to their house, and his visit always meant something important. "Liza," he said, stopping at the porch. His voice was quiet, but it held the same resolve as that day in the cellar. "We need to talk." Her grandmother, hearing his voice, came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face, usually strict, softened when she saw Mr. Smith. She knew what he had done for the puppies, and though she never said it aloud, her attitude toward him had changed. She nodded, inviting him to sit on the bench by the house. Mr. Smith placed the box on the ground and opened it. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a small leather-bound notebook. Liza recognized it immediately. It was the notebook she had once seen in Mr. Smith's hands in the cellar, but he had quickly hidden it then. Now he handed it to Liza. "This is from my Kathy," he said, and his voice trembled. "She wrote this when she was your age, about the puppies, about the village, about how she wished everything could be different." Liza carefully opened the notebook. The pages were filled with neat, childish handwriting. "I wish no one would drown the puppies. They're alive. Dad promised we'd find them a home." Liza looked up at Mr. Smith, and her throat tightened. She understood that this notebook was not just a memory. It was a promise he had once made to his daughter and was now fulfilling. "Kathy moved to the city," Mr. Smith continued, looking into the distance. "She didn't want to live where everything is decided for you. But I stayed, and all this time I did what everyone else did. Until I met you and these puppies." Liza was silent, clutching the notebook. Ray rubbed against her leg, and she felt tears welling up. Her grandmother, standing nearby, coughed quietly, but her eyes were also glistening. "You did a good thing, Mr. Smith," she said at last. "And you, Liza. You both did what was right." Mr. Smith nodded, but his gaze was fixed on Liza. He took a photograph out of the box. And it was Kathy, a little girl with a puppy in her arms, smiling just like Liza when she held Ray. "Take it," he said. "So you'll remember, and so you'll know that sometimes one person can change everything." Liza took the photograph and her fingers trembled. She looked at Mr. Smith, at her grandmother, at Ray, and suddenly felt that this moment was not just the end of a story. It was the beginning of something bigger. The village continued its life, but now there was a place in it for those who had previously been ignored. And Liza knew that she, like Mr. Smith, would continue this work for Ray, for Kathy, for everyone who believes that love is stronger than tradition. That evening, after Mr. Smith had left, Liza sat on the porch looking at the stars. Ray was sleeping at her feet, and in her hands she held Kathy's notebook. She knew that this story wasn't just about puppies. It was a story about how one choice made with the heart can leave a lasting mark. And she promised herself that this mark would live in Oak Creek forever.